Sneisen of the Tim and John Show, and right now we're just making sure that we are in fact live, and this is also being live streamed to flote.app/the Liberty Advisor. So if you guys want to go check that out, this is my page, and then from the page you can also find other links to BitChute, DLive. Actually, it's Instagram, but really, I do want to highlight the podcast. That's the one thing that I've been very consistent on. And then if you go down here, we do have the link to our library page. So I am / at the Liberty Advisor. For some reason, it has semicolon or 2, but it will also work if you just do at the Liberty Advisor. And John, how are we doing? Are we in fact live?
We're live now here on the phone. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit. So if you take over for like a couple of 2-3 minutes, and then hit the ground running, and then we'll go from there, Tim. I'm going to share it to everybody, so everybody make sure that everybody gets to see the content, because we're going through a lot of important content today. There's lots of things happening. Of course, the Fed is meeting today again. So we got lots of things to discuss, Tim. So let's get into it.
Cool, yeah, and thank you for that. And so, but if you are, watching this right now on World Alternative Media, just have you guys know that this is a longer format podcast style show. So it's not kind of the typical, report style that you are kind of more used to and accustomed to. And we are right now sandwiched in between two very big anniversaries. Yesterday being the anniversary of the Lehman Brothers crash in 2008. Hard to believe it's already 12 years ago. Also marked, my first day on the job 12 years ago. So welcome to the business. And then tomorrow we have the 1-year anniversary of the repo madness, which is when all the repo markets started kicking off and going absolutely insane. And it got to the point where a lot of the reason why I wanted to do these podcasts was because there's so much stuff going on, and it just gets to the point where John and I have probably not to sound cocky, have forgotten more than a lot of people will ever know on this stuff. And so if you want to dive into the repo stuff, you can go all the way back to our shows going back exactly a year ago now, where we get into all the craziness that's going on, because we knew that when as soon as those markets were breaking down, that was the kickoff to this major event. And we think this whole pandemic is all basically one giant extension of all of that. But we do have a lot of important stories we want to talk about as we still kind of wrap up on some of the housekeeping over here. We've got largest hedge fund manager in the world, that would be Ray Dalio, says the dollar may lose its reserve status. We've got Bill Gates talking about life won't be normal again until 2022. The IRS is trying to pay hackers to trace Monero. And then Trump wants to debate Joe Biden on the Joe Rogan show. And then also very important that I do want to mention that after an hour, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the feed on the World Alternative Media page, on the Facebook pages, and everywhere else except for flote.app. I'll probably have it going on my YouTube page as well, because that way it then automatically puts it over on library. So if you're going to want to make sure that you guys check us out, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go over to flote.app, and then actually sorry, that is right now I'm showing library, but if you go over to flote.app, go over to my page, it is / the Liberty Advisor, and then what you're gonna have to do is click on the live now, and then that is a place where you guys will be able to see us in overdrive. And the point of this is that YouTube, should not be, getting all of our content, pretty much exclusively. YouTube should not be, at this point, they should not be, honored, because these guys are absolute snakes. They've done everything they can to, censor this information, and we want to make sure that, we have backup plans, because the time is way past, the time that we should be calling for this, this sort of action. And then also, library, I've only got 28 followers on there. I do have a banned Dr. Judy Mikovits interview that is on there, which is one that I was doing with Luke Radowski, and he didn't want us to air that back when we were doing videos. So you will find that only on library.tv / at the Liberty Advisor. So definitely, guys, if you want to check that out, highly recommend that as well. And what else we've got going on here? So yeah, and the other thing I'd also recommend is you go over to the podcast, because everything I do is also in long form podcast format and MP3 format. So even the shows I do with Josh, that's shows I do with John, other random Liberty Advisor shows that we do, you guys can get them on the podcast. So we do have They're on Apple, pretty much everywhere you guys can find podcasts. So that is, most of the housekeeping, or I guess all the housekeeping we have right now. I know John right now is, hard at work getting those links all shared out. So what we'll do now is we'll get into what's going on currently in the market. And we do have the Dow Jones up 215 points. It is November 16th, 2020 at 8:14 Pacific time. S&P is up a little bit, up 0.5% on the day. NASDAQ is down 0.14, and the VIX is back over 26. And as you guys can see, on the yearly numbers here, a lot of the other foreign markets are in the red for the year, but obviously with all the rigging that's going on in these markets, that we have seen all these U.S. markets pretty much back at pretty much near all-time highs. And this is, I think, one of the craziest stories. Actually, lots of crazy stories. This is just one of them. But Ray Dalio, he is the largest hedge fund manager in the world, runs the Bridgewater hedge fund, and he's saying that there's a threat to the dollar as the world reserve currency. And this is not just some, random person over here. I mean, this is a guy who's managing more money than pretty much, anyone else besides maybe, like BlackRock or something like that. But, it's just, this is a concept that John and I have been talking about for a while over here, is because really the only thing the Federal Reserve should be doing, I mean, they really shouldn't even exist and they shouldn't be doing anything. But what they should be doing, if it really care about, is caring about keeping the dollar as a reserve currency, because the only way that everything that we basically call, life is, as American, well, I'm an American, John's not an American, but, the only way that this whole debt carousel keeps going around, and this whole, Ponzi scheme, house of cards stays afloat and stays upright, is the fact that the U.S. is the world reserve currency. And so, absent that, the average, American standard of living would absolutely plummet. There would just be absolute, hell on earth to pay at this point. But, the central bankers are getting very, 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 very cocky, because what they see is oh, well, our bond rates are at, all-time lows, and the world, wants more of our debt, even though obviously that's rigged, because it's just, the Federal Reserve buying up its own debt. But when you have somebody like Ray Dalio, I mean, did you see this article, John, where Ray Dalio was talking about how the dollar, is basically on track to lose its, reserve status, and how, he's been, favoring stocks and gold, and, has been telling people to get out of bonds and get out of cash. Did you see that article with Ray Dalio?
No, I haven't seen it, but it makes total sense. We talked about it for a long time here at WAM. Me and Josh have talked about it for 4 years plus, and of course you've been aware of that for a very, very long time as well. We tried to understand why is this happening? What is the reason why that it could, like, the actual US dollar could lose its reserve status. Well, the reason is because it's, now they're actually having to ramp up inflation so heavily, Tim, that you were having severe issues within the United States, but and they had to actually go away from, their 2% targeting, as they call. Now they're just going to average it out. There've been a lot of years with, very low interest, very low inflation. So now they're going to, crack it up and make it going fast, so it's interesting, what's going to happen over the next couple of months, and especially now. And I was watching CNN this morning, and they were talking about, the stimulus bill that they're still struggling on, getting in, any headway on, because there's so much money that wants to get spent, but nobody really wants to spend it, because they know that if they spend it, they're in some serious trouble. And if you look at the actual, here, I'm gonna actually pull up the U.S. debt clock, because it's interesting right now. The U.S. The actual deficit that they have versus the actual, like the actual deficit, the real deficit versus the government deficit numbers is quite pronounced, and it's the same here in Canada as well. You could only imagine how much deficit and how much money they're spending. Actually, right now, Tim, it's the total budget deficit has just passed 3 trillion right now in the United States. It's at 3.13 trillion, and meanwhile, the actual U.S. federal budget deficit is 4.212 trillion. So they're basically 1.1 trillion off. So it's great accounting there over at the the government. They're really good at that accounting scheme going on. Of course, they have their good bankers, helping them, and the accountants at Deloitte and all these other conglomerates, of course.
It's also amazing how the the hijackers managed to fly the Pentagon plane right into the accounting office when the Pentagon had just announced they're missing $2.3 trillion, because we did have the anniversary of 9/11 also since the last show, so wanted to point that out as well. But sorry about that.
Yeah, and it's funny how one of the strongest buildings in the world, and basically went all the way into the building, and when they release, I'm in the industry of I work in the security industry, and I gotta laugh when they release the pictures of the from the Pentagon. I know that there's way better cameras out there on the Norwegian, and this is not even the Pentagon. It's kind of the CIA in Norway has way better cameras than that 15 years ago, of what they actually released. The 3 frames or whatever they showed. The supposed airplane hitting. So we could go into so much.
Well, another thing is, another quick aside is the pilot the guy that regularly flew that plane, actually, he's like 80 years old. He lives out in Scottsdale. I've been at several events with him, and not with him, but I've seen him there and talked with him extensively. And this was like his plane. It was his plane that supposedly hit the Pentagon. He's kind of like this more like America, good old boy type guy. But he's calling out how the whole thing's BS, and there's no way you could basically take like that sort of flight pattern and then just basically skim the ground. And a guy that couldn't even fly a Cessna the week before, and now he does a maneuver that even super skilled fighter pilots couldn't do. And the G, yeah. Oh, and then it's only that. Even if they were trying to doing an unimpeded airspace, just the maneuvers and the G forces, then keeping it level with the ground, and then none of the cameras ended up catching it, and the one camera that did catch it, you see a couple frames, and it's just the physics of it don't pan out at all. But this is not a 9/11 show. Just we're talking about accounting, and at the Pentagon, the terrorists are very good at helping out the pentagram and having it hit the exact spot.
But talking about 9/11, we're kind of in 9/11 right now, 2.0.
Economic 9/11, yeah.
Yeah, economic 9/11, and with the whole COVID crisis.
Would you say this is a bigger false flag psyop than even 9/11? I mean, certainly that was like the precursor that set the stage for this. But would you say this is even what's going on now is even bigger?
I would say by far, because now it's economic, big time. The economic impact on 9/11 wasn't that huge, really. They went to war, they started spending money and all this crap, but now
the usual, yeah. This went to war,
but you don't have official 10% plus unemployment, that you have now. So the economic ramifications of this whole COVID thing, and it's interesting. Everybody blames COVID for the current economic problems, but it actually started on September 17th. Just basically a year from now. Tomorrow, and nobody talks about that. The banks actually would have failed. The whole banking system froze up, and the Fed had to start intervening in the repurchase operations, basically the money market lending overnight. So now what you've seen since then, you have an insane amount of intervention by central banks, which we knew that they would. You could predict that. Everybody wants to follow Japan, because in Japan you had, of course, the crisis where the demographic crisis that they have. And so we're hitting that right now in North America here, with Canada and the US basically at the same time hitting it. Germany, others are hitting it as well. It's funny how that works, how they're trying to cover up a full-blown economic crisis happening with, unfunded liabilities in the United States. The official number for unfunded liabilities now has jumped from 110 trillion up to 150 trillion now. it's $20.72 trillion that are, in Social Security, this is money that the U.S. government doesn't have. They need to get it from somewhere. They're gonna borrow it most likely, and they're not gonna, be able to tax.
And what people don't even realize is, so the office of there's the office of the debt, or yeah, there's an office of the debt. It's in West Virginia, and they have a filing cabinet that's not even that big. And inside the filing cabinet are the IOUs that then back Social Security, and it's literally it's a filing cabinet. It's not even probably as big as the fake wall behind me, but it's really absolutely insane. And then we see that there's eventually probably gonna be some sort of reset. But I think what people don't understand is that since the Social Security obligations are backed by debt, and then if you wipe out that debt, which they also count as an asset, well then how are you going to pay Social Security? And then it's probably going to be in some sort of universal basic income that's going to be socially engineered. Say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Senior, you didn't go get your flu shot and COVID shot, so we're not going to give you your $2,000 a month to live. And so then people are going to be forced to say, okay, well I don't have enough money to live, so I'm forced to get the vaccine, or I don't get the money. And I think it's going to be some sort of situation like that. Unfortunately, I mean, it just seems like it's very, at this point, obvious to predict what the next steps are on this. But sorry, I just wanted to point that out.
No, exactly. There's some very easy predictable things, and of course that comes to one of the articles that I shared with you, Tim, and that's the Canadian pension fund is very worried about near zero interest rates.
Yeah, we do have that, and the thing is, there's always unintended consequences for everything they do. So they need to have, I don't say need, they need to have these rates at zero, because the debts and the government debts and everything are so high that there's no way they can pay that the interest rate on it. So they have to have it at zero. But then if they have that at zero, then if you have 40% of your pension fund, 50% of your pension fund in bonds, and you're earning zero on that, and you've assumed you're going to earn rates of 7 or 8%, then the simple word is you're screwed. I mean, there's no way to do that. And then if the rates do go up, they're also screwed, because there's something called interest rate risk, and what that is the notion that raising, if you raise the increase in the price of interest rates, it's like a teeter-totter, so the underlying price of the bond goes down. And so let's say you have $1 million 10-year bond, let's say a 30-year bond, $1 million, rates go up 1%, your $1 million is now about $700,000. Rates go up 2%, now it's I'm just guessing here, it's probably about $280,000 ish. And yeah, you'll still get your piddly whatever it is, $15,000 a year in interest, or $2,000, or maybe, or sorry, $20,000 a year in interest. But guess what? By the time the 30 years is up, your money's going to be worthless. And so the other thing is, if you don't have enough money to actually then pay for all the expenditures that you have, then you have to dip into principal. And if your principal gets walloped by 60-70% on a bond, paying you 2%, it's game over. And so it's game over. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. They're stuck in this, just pretending that they can get out of it. And if they couldn't get out of it, and they couldn't pay the debt down during the greatest economic recovery in the history of the world, allegedly, then how the hell do they think they're going to do it now? Well, they're not even talking about doing it now. And next time I throw it back to you, I'm going to find another article that we didn't have up, where Mnuchin the other day came out and said something to the effect of, debts and deficits don't matter, especially right now, that this is not the time to be worried about the Federal Reserve increasing its balance sheet. And then the other thing I have to ask is, why is the Federal Reserve even talking with Treasury? I mean, shouldn't there be some sort of Chinese firewall? But those two things shouldn't even be allowed to talk about. But I mean, I know they got rid of Glass-Steagall in '99, but the whole notion of the Federal Reserve, if you're going to even buy into what the notion of it was, is that you should have an independent central bank. So why is the independent central bank then taking marching orders from Steve Mnuchin, when all these guys are basically former Goldman Sachs guys, and all just a bunch of den of vipers and snakes? But I'm going to go find that article while you wrap up that discussion on that topic about Mnuchin.
No, what's going to happen is that they're forced, like other sovereign wealth funds. We have in Norway the Norwegian pension fund and sovereign wealth fund called the Oil Fund. They were, at the point when me and Josh did a video warning about, the issues with the sovereign wealth fund, was around 70%. Of the money that they invested was in stocks. They owned 1% of all the stocks worldwide on all the major indexes. And I warned, like this time is very different. Everybody said like, well, we just, the krona will strengthen all this garbage. The krona is severely weakened because on top of that, you had the oil prices drop. Like last time the crash was in 2008, the oil fund in Norway was able to mitigate their hit by having, a strong krona and a strong oil price. It was around 120 at the time. Now you're seeing the total opposite. The actual oil price is around, hovering around the $30-$40. Like it's about 40 something for Brent crude right now in Norway. And so you're seeing some serious issues there. And so where are they going to go if they're going to mitigate their hit on the stock market? Where are they going to jump? Are they going to jump into bonds that are basically in Norway? They're zero. The actual 10-year. Where are they going to go? Are they going to go to and invest in Venezuela or Argentina with high yielding bonds, which a lot of people have been forced to do, and pension funds probably because they are looking for yield in order to cover their intended growth in order to be able to keep the Ponzi scheme going that the pension plans are. So they're in some serious issues there. Government do another thing, that a lot of pension funds, they're not going to want to buy all this debt that's getting printed by the governments. You're going to have some serious ramifications there too, because they're forced right now to buy a lot of times in instances in Germany and other places in Europe. They're forced to buy negative yielding bonds, getting a negative yielding return on, the pensioners' supposed, increase the pensioners' money. And in Canada, for example, you had the debt levels being at officially $685 billion for a government. That was in 2019, and though 2019, Tim, you'll be shocked to, well, I'm not shocked at all. The official number right now is 1.8 billion. So that's an increase of $1.2 trillion. And if that's a threefold increase in national debt, Tim, over just 1 year. I don't know where the sustainability there comes in. What you're going to end up seeing is you're just going to have the bailout of pension funds by, the buying of these assets that are, terribly yielding by the central banks. They're going to have to buy all them up, Tim. There's no other way to get out of this than, the central bank will own everything than nothing.
Yeah, and what I'm showing right now is, as just so some people know, is that you do have a lot of the major, not a lot. You do have several, European and foreign countries out there who already have negative 10-year bonds. So I mean, so Germany over here, 10-year yield is negative 0.49, France negative 0.22, Netherlands negative 0.38, Switzerland negative 0.5, and and then some of these other countries, you go to their shorter term bonds like Italy, it's showing 0.96, and I'm guessing that they have negative on the shorter ones. And yeah, so you got 1 year Italian bond is negative 0.02%. So I do see in the chat we've got I died in 2020 saying now I heard it all in regards to buying a negative bond. And the thing is, it's not, John and I are not talking about proposals. We're talking about things that are already happening. It's these banks or these countries already have negative yields on there, and then you got we got an article over here where it shows Biden's multi-trillion-dollar budget is the biggest increase in decades. And so now there's now that they've seen all the Republicans go and sell out, and speaking of, well, you got Rand Paul over here calling out the other Republicans who are selling out, and because he voted against the latest stimulus bill, and he went on to say the majority of Republicans are now no different than socialist Democrats when it comes to debt. Paul wrote on Twitter in July, they simply don't care about debt and preparing to add at least another $1 trillion in debt this month, combined with the trillions from earlier this month. The cumulative federal budget deficit for the first 11 months of the fiscal year 2020 was $3 trillion, according to the CBO, a byproduct of intensified government spending to get the economy through the pandemic-associated shutdown. And then we go to the top of the article, and it's the one that I was telling you about before, is now is not the time to worry about the fiscal deficit or the Fed's balance sheet Mnuchin says. So it's funny because, it wasn't the time to worry about it either when we were, the greatest economy ever, but it's because of these huge budget proposals that now, the Treasury and the Fed are, basically illegally then including together to then have the Federal Reserve, own everything. And then, and some people think that, that there's been, end run around the Fed, and now Trump, has nationalized the Fed. And to me, I mean, that's just like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because, the Federal Reserve is now, twice as strong as they were before. The thing that their product that they're selling is debt. Then the more debt they get, then hypothetically the more interest they get. And then, but it's not even about that. It's about the power and control. They already own a third of all mortgages. It's just, that drives me nuts more than anything, is when, it's mainly the Q people who are out there and saying, oh, well, the Federal Reserve has just been nationalized by Donald Trump, when in actuality it's, Trump has, expanded their powers. Not really, he didn't personally expand it, but he's been cheerleading the expansion of this all along. And, and it sucks because in 2015, around this time, he was talking about how the unemployment numbers were fake and how the inflation numbers were fake. And he was, talking about how they faked them. And he was also, mentioning how, the economy was just one big giant bubble. Actually, he called it a big, fat, ugly bubble in, it was either 2015 or 2016. But anyways, just to see him sell out on that was just, for me, it was just, an
it was very
irreparable damage.
presidential. Can we say that?
Very, very presidential. Speaking of presidential, we and it's funny, this is a Forbes article that is now saying, here are 3 reasons why Joe Biden shouldn't debate Trump at all, let alone debating him on Joe Rogan. And so for me, I mean, yeah, politics is all theater, but that would be absolutely hilarious to see, Donald Trump on Joe Rogan with Joe Biden for 4 hours. I mean, I couldn't even, and the thing is, why?
You go like 10 minutes, Biden.
I mean, the fact that we have presidential debates that are sponsored by the Committee on Presidential Debates, which is really a private organization that's sponsored by, like, I don't know, I think it's like Budweiser and like a few different lawyers and like a couple of airlines, and it used to be the Women's League of Voters, and then I think after Ross Perot got in, they had to then nix that because they wanted to make sure that never happened again. So they are trying to keep libertarians out, and other, not that I'm not really even a big fan of the Libertarian Party, even though I was a delegate for them this go around. But it's just it's just sort of it's just insulting that we've got presidential debates, which is just theater, that is really, okay, let's give your full answer on this in 45 seconds, and instead of it should be long form debates. It should be multi-hours long, and if your ass can't stand up there for 3 or 4 hours, then you shouldn't be fit to be president. Just like Hillary Clinton, I was sleeping during the September 11th Benghazi attacks, which we all know was an absolute lie. But personally, I would love to see, even though I'm not holding my breath for any of these politicians, and I think they're all liars, and I would love to see the spectacle of a Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, Joe Biden debate. I think would be, I would probably pay to see that. I mean, that would be absolutely awesome, just to see the ass kicking that Trump would give to Joe Biden. Not that, but I still think Joe Biden's going to win, not the debate, but I think they're going to cheat his way to victory. There's just so many different ways they can do that, and it's probably outside the bounds of what we really wanted to get into today. But and you said you actually listened to the podcast where it was Tim Kennedy who was the one who first brought up that to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Tim Kennedy was like, "Oh, I think it was actually Joe Rogan bringing it up himself," and then Tim is like, "That's a great idea. Let's do it." So it's, it was interesting. It was and not that I agree with a lot that Tim Kennedy has to say. Unfortunately, he's he's been indoctrinated, in my point of view, by being a Green Beret and being the spear of the system. Basically, he is probably the most indoctrinated person that is. I don't know. Like, that's just my point of view. You could say all you want.
I think he got into it. I forgot with somebody at one point. I was definitely didn't take his side, but he first kind of came on my radar when I was watching the Hunting Hitler series on History Channel. And back when History Channel did show, I think it was History Channel, but anyways, it was did you ever see that show, Hunting Hitler? And he was like the main one of the main stars of that. Well, it was actually fascinating because I first kind of started watching it thinking that it was definitely BS and like no way that Hitler could have escaped and definitely didn't die in Argentina. I will say they did paint quite the compelling picture that At the very minimum, there's no evidence that Hitler actually died in that bunker. And they go through like all. I mean, and I think Tim Kennedy was also trying to disprove this as well, and a couple other guys in there were disproving it. But it does. They painted it for anyone that, I mean, don't knock it if you haven't seen it, but if you've gone through and watched them, they did paint quite the compelling case that, you know, at the very least that, you know, the story that we were told and how Hitler died, you know, wasn't the true story. And Tim Kennedy was sort of like one of the main stars of that. And so that's my exposure really to him. I'm not an expert on him, but I do know there's a lot of statist things that he said that I definitely don't agree on. But, you know, I would love to see that debate if and when it does happen. My guess is it won't happen, because you know, I think Biden's handlers are smart enough to realize that he's basically there just as a placeholder to have the Kamala Harris administration take over, which I believe yesterday there was a gaffe where they even called it the Harris administration, or Kamala Harris called it the Harris administration, and then Biden then later on then came out and said something like the Harris-Biden administration, but in that order. And so, you know, and she's, you know, I mean, just think about, you know, like the two worst people possible. Like, okay, you know, all this, you know, everything's all riled up because of Black Lives Matters and because of the police. And so, but which really are both symptoms of the drug war. And so, yeah, let's get the guy who, you know, wrote and co-sponsored the 94 crime bill to put all the black people in jail. And then let's also get the person that, you know, enforced it and put her own people in jail. And, you know, and then she comes from a slave-owning family, even though she's black. So, yeah, I mean, I couldn't think of, like, basically two worst people at the Democratic ticket. And it's like they're trying to throw the game. I think they're still going to end up, you know, stealing it somehow. But,
you know, Hillary wants to, you know, help them out. So suddenly you're going to have one of those days where the whole White House is dead and Hillary's there. It's like, oh, I survived.
Yeah. And then one other thing that you had showed me, and this is an article. Where is it from? CNBS. Oh, sorry, I meant CNBC.com. And it's Bill Gates. This is the very best case scenario for when life can return to normal post-pandemic. And long story short is in 2022. So, you know, and I do remember, like, right out of the gates, they were always saying 18 months. And even though they were saying 2 weeks. And so, you know, it's... you know, they've been prepping this for us. So now 2022 is when when life becomes normal, but we still have to have masks on, which I actually haven't touched a mask the entire month of August or September.
Well, you know, talking about Bill Gates, did you see what actually just happened yesterday?
No.
His dad died.
Oh, I know. I did see the remembering. You know, for some reason I thought his dad already died. I know his dad was... You know, was he like the CFO or treasurer of Planned Parenthood? His grandfather.
Yeah, so he was a member of the Eugenics Society too.
Yeah, and then do you know what his father's job was? So this would be Bill Gates' grandfather. Drum roll, please. Federal Reserve Governor, I believe, of the Washington branch. So Bill Gates' grandpa was a mother effing Federal Reserve Governor.
He's just like a little guy in his basement, you know.
It's like, I'm just Bill Gates, and I'm just in this tiny. I mean, you know, he comes from extreme wealth. You know, the whole, you know, and actually Luke Rudowski and I did, you know, it was mainly my research on this, but you know, it was going through and talking about the whole history of Microsoft and how he stole the technology from this guy named Gary Kurdahl, and then you know, getting it to his mom at IBM.
Inequality too.
Yeah, so there is. I think there may have been a We Are Change video. I'm not sure if it was on Change the News. I think it was a We Are Change video that I did with Luke, and we, you know, I went through the whole history of this guy and you know, stealing the technology. But no, I didn't. For some reason, I thought his dad. I don't even know. I thought he maybe already died, but actually, I shouldn't laugh at this. But did he die of coronavirus? I mean,
I did read a whole bunch, and I don't think so.
Yeah, so he's the only person that's 94 years old in the country that didn't die of coronavirus, because I'm sure every other person in the world would. But yep, there he goes, 94 years old. You know, producing. You know, his accomplishments are, you know, killing more black people than the KKK basically did on
you gotta remember, you remember the Eugenics Society was basically a bunch of white supremacists. You know, wanting to build a certain race of people that were smart and doing this and that, and didn't want poor people. They didn't like poor people at all.
Yeah, I mean, you get into Margaret Sanger, who's the founder of Planned Parenthood, and she said blacks, Jews, and Italians, I mean, she may have said colored people, but were were like weeds, and like weeds that need to be exterminated, and then the whole plan was we need to. I mean, all this stuff is in like letters and in archives,
And they've been talking about the reason why they put it in poor neighborhoods was to do that same reason.
and all you need to do is buy off a couple of preachers with a little bit of with a little bit of money, and then then we'll get him in there. But so the true evil people. And there was actually a video by maybe I'll try to find this next time you want to rant. There's a video by Malcolm X way back in the day where he's saying that really you've got Republicans who are basically a bunch of wolves, but then the real danger are the rich white elitist liberals. That it's the rich white liberals who come posing as your friend, who are really the devils, who are trying to basically and they're just using the 3 million at the time. It was 3 million black people that vote as a political. They said, but what he was saying is there's 11 million at the time, 11 million black people, only 3 million of them vote, but they're willing to pander to get that 3 million vote, but then they don't actually do anything. And if you actually, and what I would like to do as a thought experiment, I mean, it probably would get me kicked off YouTube, and I'm sure it would create some sort of furor, is if I actually gave that Malcolm X speech, but then maybe just replace the word, I think he says, the word he's, basically if I just replace a couple words with, African American from what he says, but then not attribute it to him, I bet there'd be massive backlash, but yet it was a Malcolm X speech. And maybe I'll, who knows, YouTube will probably end up, even though it's fair use, will probably end up, having some sort of strike on the channel. But if you guys haven't seen it, type in
copyright strike, Tim.
Yeah, type in Malcolm X, rich white liberal. It's it was like a 10-minute speech that he gave back in the day, and it's quite fascinating, because it's basically saying it's the rich white liberals are the real enemies of the black people, and obviously mainly it's other blacks killing other blacks, but you're not allowed to mention that, so I guess we won't mention that.
They want to sit as oligarchs when a communist regime is put in place, right? Like people think that oh, we're gonna have communist revolution. But then they forget, like every single time that's been tried out, there's a rich oligarch is sitting on top, siphoning off the money of the economy while everybody starves to death.
Yeah, and they all go back to the British eugenics societies and the lady who I know Margaret Sanger looked up to this lady in Britain, and that lady I forgot her name, but that lady in Britain was on pen pals with Hitler. And it was all started to create pure bloodlines and to eradicate. And me being Italian, they're one of the people. I mean, they wanted to eradicate me. I mean, I grew up with 19-year-old parents. I mean, 19 years old. I mean, I was basically the top of the chopping block of somebody that they'd want to get an abortion, and grew up to poor parents, and then single parents. So I mean, but you're able to rise up against all that stuff. Obviously, the cards are stacked against you, and it's just, and then you take a look at how the UN was founded, and that was founded by eugenicists, and then getting into the Rockefeller Foundation and all this stuff that really what you need to do
and
is
then
go
the Sustainable Development Goals were created by the oil industry. It's funny how that works. It's who was it? Maurice Strong, actually, the guy that was behind the Sustainable Development Goals that we have today. He co-wrote it with Gro Harlem Brundtland, former Prime Minister of the Labour Party of Norway. He actually was hired by Rockefeller because Maurice Strong was working in the Albertan oil industry at the time. So, there you go. Like it's this whole Sustainable Development Goals and the oil industry, they just want to be able to have still control over the energy. So they're moving into taking control of the new energy sources that's going to get rammed down our throat, because we're not supposed to have easy access to energy, because that would make us more able to do things like look at the dimensional oil and then the printing of currency, what that done to population growth. It's just massive, right? And what they're really afraid of is what we should focus on is, of course, decentralization of money, and also decentralization of energy. Those two together,
and those are the solutions. And you go back into the founding of the UN. I think I get the Huxleys mixed up, but I think it was Julian Huxley, and then one of the other Huxleys was a brave Brave New World, and then you get into their writings. They're all top of the Eugenics Society, and then they also help form things like the World Wildlife Foundation, which are actually to kill animals, not to So it's just like how people in CPS will be the ones who are kidnapping children, and it's always the people who are in these psychopaths who then go to the thing. It's always the chicken guard in the hen house. Like, oh, we'll have a Goldman Sachs Federal Reserve governor or a guy worth billions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars safeguard the treasury, because they really care about you. But I do want to let people know that we are coming up at the top of the hour, and at the top of the hour we're just going to be streaming over on flote.app. So you guys want to go over, see what that looks like. I have it paused for bandwidth issues right now, but it's flote.app/The Liberty Advisor. Also, if you want to go over to my YouTube channel as well right now, it's type in Tim Picciott, The Liberty Advisor, or The Liberty Advisor. I'm going to keep that one up as well, and then we will be going over to it will be posted afterwards on library.tv/@The Liberty Advisor. We'll get you there as well, and then afterwards you will see the full show there. Also, available on iTunes and pretty much everywhere else you can get podcast feeds. Because personally, I don't watch a lot of videos, don't listen to a lot. I mean, I mainly am I like going around doing stuff, out walking the dog, doing different running errands, and listening to content personally. Now I know if you're obviously watching it right now, maybe that doesn't fit the bill, or you don't have time now, you want to come back later. That's a great way to do it. But yeah, this whole world was set up by different eugenicists, and speaking of eugenicists, we do have the Federal Reserve our meeting right now as we speak, and surprise surprise, they're going to keep rates on hold till 2023. And guess what, surprise here, they're going to keep rates low forever. There's no way they're raising rates. I was talking about this in 2011 and got in trouble by the company I was working with at the time, because they intercepted an email where I said that, and they're like, oh, you can't prognosticate on that, which they should have hired me as their economic advisor, because they can talk about raising rates all they want, but as soon as they did start raising rates, which is basically a year ago. Actually, it was a little bit more than a year ago. It was the end of 2018 is when they had to, reverse course on, oh yeah, we can sell $50 billion of bonds a month. I mean, I was calling that out months before I ever joined WHAM, calling that out months in advance on my podcast, saying there's no way they can sell $50 billion of bonds a month and have a trade war with China, who is the second largest purchaser of bonds. The first largest purchaser of bonds. The first largest purchaser of the bonds is the Federal Reserve, and now you're going to go from being the largest purchaser to the largest seller, while then having a trade war with your second largest purchaser, and then your third largest purchaser is Japan, and they're the most indebted first world country in the world. I mean, it doesn't seem like a very good strategy to me, and so they get very cocky with everything that's going on, and and one guy who sort of is coming around and surprising me, and he's always saying everything so that way he can say he was right. But you have Jim Cramer on the Anthony Popoliano podcast talking about how he is willing to invest 1% of his net worth into Bitcoin, because he sees gold as something that in his opinion, and real estate, it might keep up with inflation but won't actually make money during inflation, and he thinks that Bitcoin could be something that could potentially actually make money during during those types of environments. And it says where let me see here. Okay, I mean, this is Jim Cramer speaking. I mean, people talk about like crypto gets hacked or whatever. What's really bad? It's when your kids can't find your gold, and that is, by the way, not unusual. I mean, that's a problem in crypto too if you were to pass away. So this is why I am fixated on needing to own crypto, because I fear a massive amount of inflation, and I don't have any. Gold will do okay. The houses will do okay. Those will keep me running in place. The idea of actually making money, well, holy cow, I'll take a shot at it with 1%. And who knows if he's actually being genuine, or if he's just trying to, kiss Anthony Pompiliano's ass. But I do want to, thank Zach, who is also every dipdol on our Discord channel as well, and that's where John. I'm going to be getting more active on there, but John's very active. We got a lot of active people on there, sharing lots of good economic stuff. So if you guys are economic nerds like we are, and want to get more of the day to day, that is definitely a great place to find it. But what do you think of Jim Cramer coming out and saying that even he's looking at putting 1% of his net worth into something like Bitcoin? I personally never really thought I'd see the day of him, capitulating on that and saying that. So what do you have to make about that?
Well, I wrote an article back in 2019 saying this is going to be the year that central banks is going to add Bitcoin to their reserves. Of course, it hasn't been yet. There's been no central bank, because if any central bank did that, that'd be the demise of central bank, as they would actually capitulate to the new system. So, of course, they're not going to do that. But it's interesting that he's trying to come out and say that he'll put 1% of his portfolio in that. And of course, with potential drop in the stock market, but who knows? With all this currency printing and everything coming forth, you just have a Venezuela melt up, right? Where stock market goes up together with the inflation, which of course happened. But of course, gold and silver and crypto in Venezuela was way better hedged than the stock market itself, as the stock market didn't near perform as well as gold and gold, silver, and crypto did during and continuously during the Venezuelan crisis. Like right now, for example, you have let me go in there, Tim. I want to go and check out something here. We're gonna go to Venezuela. And just if you guys are interested in finding all this data that I'm looking at, you could go to Trading Economics. You get all the data there. It's fantastic. It's very easy to use. But I want to go currently to the Venezuelan Bolivar here. No, sorry, it's not it's not the Bolivar. Yeah, it's the Bolivar. It's not the Bolivar Sprete. It's the Bolivar Soberano. And actually, I'm going to share, Tim, I'm just going to start the screen share here quickly, because this is something that, right again, they're having another hyperinflation in Venezuela, as they're actually, their whole economy melted down, their currency collapsed, the Bolivar, it was called the Bolivar Fuerte. But as you can see here, there's a new hyperinflation happening in Venezuela right now, and it's in the Soberano. And as you can see again, if you go down here just a sec, I'm just gonna go down to the stock market in Venezuela. As you saw there, you can see that was the actual Bolivar Soberano. The new currency is hyperinflating yet again, so second hyperinflation over the other one. And as you can see here, take a look, Tim. This is like it literally is following the death of the currency itself. The stock market. We could put it like this is interesting here. Let's go out to a 25-year window here. And as you can see, do you see that one peak there, Tim? That was the failure of the Bolivar Fuerte, the first hyperinflation that I predicted in my book that I wrote in 2013. I said that if you're reading this book, you probably ended up in a massive devaluation of the currency or a currency failure. Actually, they had a hyperinflation, then they had the devaluation. So I got 2 points there, and now they have another hyperinflation yet again. So it's interesting how they're just totally mismanaging. And as you can see now, it's even worse, Tim, than the first one. So that's just like what could potentially happen. As I said, the people are calling for deflation, but again, you could potentially also force, as Ben Bernanke said, the printing presses will always win over deflation.
Or let's not forget that I call him Osama Ben Bernanke, but let's not forget that you also had Bernie Sanders, who was praising what a great job Venezuela was doing with their economy, and he's also praising Cuba's like literacy rates and things like that. And he's like, oh yeah, Venezuela, they nationalized their oil and they're giving it back to the people, and everything is fine until the day it's not fine. I think is the biggest basically takeaway there is. Everyone's really complacent until boom, there's a crisis, but then they use the crisis that they created to then take more power, and then ultimately clamp down on the people even worse. And when it comes to something like Venezuela, like we can get away with it because we are the world reserve currency. But then guess what? When you've got people like even Ray Dalio talking about how there's a threat to the dollar, maintaining its status as a reserve currency, then I think it should be grounds for other people, especially the Treasury and the Fed, maybe coming out and not going on this crazy path of destruction that we're currently on.
No, totally, Tim. It's what we're hit right now, and this is actually the title of the whole live stream here, was
something that I came up with the other day because it makes totally sense because it's a new era in we got too big to fail. They're calling it the current monetary elite. I would call them too big to exist, because it comes to a point where an organization, government, everything gets way too big to exist, and we're at that point with both governments. They're extremely over indebted. They're getting very totalitarian, and that's the reason why they are, is because they need to protect the fiat currency that are underlying and losing so much value that they have to become totalitarian. Same with as you have further mergers and acquisitions right now. You'll have a massive, conglomerate of companies at the top that there's zero competition anymore, and they're too big to exist now. And they're zombies. They're getting fed by, cheap currency getting printed by the Federal Reserve and other central banks around the world. And just look at the concentration of capital in the major stocks, right? Like Apple, Google, Facebook, and so on. It's just insane, the actual amount of I don't know what the percentages are now, but last time I think we looked, it was 21% of the total index was of capital was in just 5 companies, right? So it's getting to a point where it's really bad. So I think all these sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and all this stuff that are just getting so massive, they're too big to exist as well, because they're not sustainable anymore. They're not going to work. And so, Tim, what we're going to see is you're going to see a lot of calamity coming out of this, because there's going to be a lot of inflation some places, but then there's going to be massive deflation in other places. I don't think we're going to see, like, people are calling for debt jubilees. They're going to have to cancel the debt. How the debt jubilee is going to look, Tim? It's going to look the way that basically the Federal Reserve will buy all the debt, right? Like, buy all the derivatives that are attached to all this subprime debt and all this garbage that is out there in the debt system. But then the Fed is going to be the creditor to you. So I don't think you're still going to be able to get away with not paying your debt for a while. If the Federal Reserve still exists, that's definitely not going to happen. You're not going to have a debt jubilee. Everybody wants to call for it, but if you have a debt jubilee, the whole all the banks will fail. Everything would just totally collapse, and that's because it's too big to exist. When you can't have a bank collapse that are mismanaged, or government collapse because it's mismanaged, it's too big to exist. It will fail, and that's the problem. Their point of view is that it's too big to fail, so they need to continue to save it.